episode of the Average Joe Football Show. I'm your host, Joe Fair. Thank you guys so much for tuning in for another episode this week. I want to say a quick thanks to everybody that followed the show this week as we moved off of SoundCloud and we moved to Apple Podcasts and to Spotify and to Podbean. So a quick shout out to all you guys. Thank you guys so much for coming with us on that move. Really excited to be on those new platforms because I think that they're going to make the show a lot more accessible and hopefully make the show more successful down the road. So thank you guys very much for tuning into the show. On today's show, we have the schedule, the NFL schedule finally released, so we're going to have that to talk about. We have quite a bit of news. We're going to try to make our way through the news in the NFL quickly. But before that, on this show, I'm constantly trying to improve, constantly trying to see how I can get better, how I can make the show more entertaining, more engaging, make myself a better podcaster. I've been told by a lot of people, well, not a lot of people, but I've been told by a few people, and I really appreciate constructive criticism. So if you have anything for me that I could get better so I could entertain you guys better, I would really appreciate that if you would send that to me on Twitter or put it on Apple Podcasts or whatever. So I really appreciate the constructive criticism. And one of the things that I've heard is, to talk more about myself, make myself more personable, kind of let you guys know who I am, let you guys know what's going on, just have more of a personality, which is something that I definitely understand, something that I need to improve on. So figured why not do that on today's show. Right now it's a lazy Sunday afternoon. I'm sitting here in where I usually record the podcast in my bedroom, mine and my wife's bedroom. I have blankets and pillows all over the floor. That's the best way to get the best sound quality that I can possibly do for you guys here. I have blankets and pillows scattered all over the floor to try to get the echoing out. I'm having trouble with echoing today. And honestly, if I'm being honest with you guys, I am not in the right mindset, I guess, to podcast today. I'm just not feeling it today. It's like, I don't know if you guys know writer's block, how writers on some days feel like they can't write, but I feel like I had that today. I'm trying to sit down. I've tried over and over to start this podcast over and over and over, and I just cannot do it. I've tried different things. I tried eating before I started here. I tried screaming. I tried crying a little bit. No, I'm just kidding on those things, but I'm struggling to put myself in the right headspace to record today, so I'm hoping throughout the show that I become more and more comfortable to talk about football, to entertain you guys. So thank you guys so much for tuning in, and hopefully I can get myself into that headspace. We do have quite a lot to talk about in today's show, so I'm definitely excited. I worked pretty hard on today's show. I got a lot of stuff outlined, so without further ado, why don't we just jump right into the show. Enough about me and my insecurities. Let's talk about what you really came here for, and that's the NFL. So let's just jump right into the news. First up in the news, we have a little bit of somber news. This happened just a couple days after I recorded last week's episode, so we couldn't get it on last week's episode, but I definitely don't want to not talk about it, and that was former Dolphins and Baltimore Colts head coach Don Shula passed away at the age of 90 last week, and this is definitely really sad news, personally as a Dolphins fan, and I think just as a football fan in general. Don Shula, he's a Hall of Famer, a two-time Super Bowl champ, 4-time Coach of the Year. He's in the Dolphins honor roll. He was on the NFL 100th anniversary all-time team. He has the only undefeated season in NFL history. That's something that means a lot to Dolphins fans, a lot to me. He has 347 career wins. He's the most winning coach of all time. And he is the most important figure in the history of the Dolphins franchise. You can say what you want about Dan Marino. You can say what you want about Larry Zonka, guys like that. Joe Robbie, you can say what you want about those guys, but when it comes down to it, the Dolphins are not where they are today. The Dolphins might not even be a team without Don Shula. Don Shula is the greatest figure in Dolphins history, and it's not even just who he is as a coach. He was an amazing coach. He won over decades and decades in the NFL. He won Super Bowls. He took his team to so many Super Bowls, and he coached in different generations. I mean, different times of football. football was almost a different sport from when he started coaching to when his career was over. I mean, just a phenomenal coach, one of, if not the best coach in the history of the NFL. But you can also talk about the man, and I think going on Twitter this week and seeing a lot of articles, a lot of people giving their opinions, giving their eulogies for Don Shula. It really shows you the kind of man that he was, not only as a coach but as a person. And obviously, it's very sad news to see him die at the age of 90. But not only is it sad, but we can also celebrate. I think he had a tremendous life. I mean, those 90 years were lived to the absolute fullest. So Don Shula, rest in peace to Don Shula. And thank you, personally as a Dolphins fan, thank you for everything that you did for the Miami Dolphins. In pretty much all of that was before my time, before me even starting to root for the Dolphins. But that's one of the first things you learn about as a Dolphins fan is Don Shula and the unbelievable impact that he had with the Miami Dolphins. And the Dolphins would be absolutely nowhere without him. So thank you very much to Coach Shula, and rest in peace to Coach Shula. And my thoughts and prayers are with the entire family and friends there, the Shula family, and all of the people that were close to him. So rest in peace, and thank you very much, Coach Shula. Moving on in the news, we have this week, ESPN actually announces that Booger McFarland and Joe Tessitore will no longer return as the duo on Monday Night Football. They will no longer be the commentators on Monday Night Football. And I know a lot of people are going to be celebrating. A lot of people are going to be hooting and hollering about this because Booger McFarland and Joe Tessitore, mostly Booger McFarland, I would say, were not very well loved as commentators. Me personally, do I love Booger McFarland and Joe Tessitore on Monday Night Football? No, not necessarily. Obviously you can go on YouTube and watch compilations of Booger McFarland saying really stupid things, but as somebody who's doing a podcast now and is recording can understand, and I can actually edit my stuff. It's not live, so I can understand how hard it is to talk about football for a certain amount of time. So I have empathy for Booger McFarland. Is he the best commentator out there? Is he Tony Romo? No, but to me, Monday Night Football, their problem was not only the commentating booth. It was not the best commentating booth in football, but I think lately it seems like Monday Night Football is not getting good games. And we'll talk about that later with the schedule release. It seems like most of the best primetime games to me, in my opinion, are games that are on Sunday night and games that are on Thursday night. Thursday night has a phenomenal schedule this year. I think the root of the problem for Monday Night Football is we just need to get better games on Monday Night Football. So the ESPN has not announced who the new duo will be or how many people it will be in the booth on Monday Night Football this year, but obviously can't be too much worse than what we had last couple of years with Booger McFarland. Obviously, I have empathy for them. I hope they land on their feet, but it is kind of exciting to potentially have a new booth on Monday Night Football. And thirdly, in the news, we have the NFL announcing this week, because of the whole COVID-19 pandemic, that no games will be played overseas in the 2020 NFL season. Not just overseas, I guess. We had games in Mexico this year. The Cardinals and the Falcons and the Dolphins had all been confirmed to play one of their home games internationally this year, and the Jaguars had 2 games internationally this year. So obviously, very disappointing news for international fans. As somebody who is a fan of football outside of the United States, I'm currently residing in Canada. That's where I live. I can have empathy. I can kind of feel for international fans. It definitely sucks for them, but you can definitely understand why the NFL would not want to play games internationally this year with everything going on. We just hope we can have an NFL season at this point and have a regular NFL season. So hopefully next year it's back to normal and we can have those really passionate fans in England and in Mexico. Hopefully they can get their games back next year. And then we have Frank Gore signing with the New York Jets on a 1-year deal. This guy just refuses to quit. He's going into his 16th NFL season this year. He has 15,347 yards, which is 3rd all time. I mean, this guy's just trying to climb his way into the Hall of Fame. In my opinion, he is a Hall of Famer. I think when you look at how many rushing yards he has, I don't care if he's never been the best running back in the NFL. I think you got to let the man in the NFL Hall of Fame just based on on longevity. I mean, he continues to succeed. Just a couple years ago, he was the Dolphins' leading rusher with Adam Gase, and now Adam Gase moved to New York, and Adam Gase loves Frank Gore, so he joins Le'Veon Bell in that running back room. It'd be interesting to see if he has anything left. I would have to guess that the inconvenient truth still has a couple more years left in him, so we get to see Frank Gore at least one more season. And then next up in the news, we have Cam Newton reportedly open, in quotes, open to a backup role. This kind of goes contradictory of what we've heard the last few weeks. Cam Newton basically coming out and saying he wants to be a starter. He will not accept a backup role. But now, I mean, I think he's starting to see that there's not a whole lot of starting quarterback jobs left in the NFL. I mean, it's weird. Just a few years ago, we were wondering if we could ever find enough quarterbacks to start for every team. And now it seems like every team has a starter, and there's not that many holes left at the quarterback position. So, in my opinion, one spot that I've been saying since the beginning, I would love to see Cam Newton in this spot because I think it makes sense for him, and that's the Buffalo Bills. I think Brandon Beane and Sean McDermott, they come from the Carolina Panthers, come from Ron Rivera, that system, and we've seen them over and over and over sign Carolina Panthers players, bring in Carolina Panthers coaches. To me, it makes sense for Cam Newton to go sign with the Buffalo Bills, play backup to Josh Allen for a season, and the Buffalo Bills, I think this year they see it as a win now type of year. The Patriots no longer have Tom Brady. A lot of people expecting them to fall off. To me, this seems like the year for the Buffalo Bills to go all out. And you know, we don't know for sure if they can totally rely on Josh Allen. He had a pretty good season last year, but we saw him lose his absolute marbles in the Houston Texans playoff game last year. I don't think I've ever seen a quarterback just completely fall apart like that mentally. That was one of the most bizarre things I've ever seen. So you're obviously, the Bills are hoping Josh Allen can develop into that franchise quarterback. But now, if you bring in Cam Newton, you have a guy waiting behind him. And if Josh Allen falls off, if he has a Mitchell Trubisky type of year, this upcoming year where everybody thought Mitchell Trubisky would be an MVP candidate last year going into the season, if Josh Allen has that type of year, where he falls off and he's just a shell of what we thought he would be, you can bring in Cam Newton. He can start right away for your team, and you can hopefully not miss a beat and maybe even improve with Cam Newton there. And I think Cam Newton's going to be hungry. I'm excited to see where he goes. I'm excited to see if he can get back to the old Cam Newton that everybody loved to watch. He's definitely one of the more entertaining players to watch when he's at full form. But yeah, I think it's still an interesting storyline to see where Cam Newton lands, if he's going to be a starter this year, or if he's going to have a team at all this year, or if he maybe waits it out a little bit, waits for a quarterback to get injured to potentially replace him on a team. But obviously this year, without any real training camps right now, the likelihood of somebody getting injured is lower this year. So COVID-19 has definitely hurt Cam Newton more than basically any player this season. But I definitely curious, and we will continue to cover wherever Cam Newton lands. Definitely one of the storylines still remaining in this NFL offseason. Now we have a couple more things. We're just going to quickly go over some quick hit news, not dive too deep into these last few bits, but pass interference this year in the 2020 season is not going to be reviewable. Roger Goodell announced that this week, that pass interference will not be reviewable, and thank the Lord that it's not going to be reviewable. It was an absolute disaster last year. I've never been more confused about what is pass interference and what isn't pass interference. I mean, the whole point of the rule was to make things easier, to clear things up, and they went literally the opposite way. They made it so much more confusing. I still to this day don't know what pass interference is. I still to this day don't really know what a catch is in the NFL. These are two things that is just beyond me. I don't understand. But yeah, I'm definitely excited. It slowed the game down tremendously last year. I mean, the officials are going to make mistakes, and it's going to suck, but I don't think that making pass interference reviewable was the right move last year. It did not work, and I'm excited that it's gone. And then we have a couple of offensive linemen still on the board. Saints released guard Larry Warford, who's a 3-time Pro Bowler, so a Pro Bowl type guard. They released him, so a little bit more depth in free agency in the remaining free agents there at guard. And Jason Peters, former Philadelphia Eagles tackle, old man, I believe he's 39, says he still plans to play this year. So there's a couple of offensive linemen still available on the board. I'd love to see teams like maybe the Tampa Bay Buccaneers try to bolster their offensive line for Tom Brady. But I think both of these guys will find homes. So there's still some pretty good quality offensive linemen, even though they're old. There's still some teams that could definitely lose or use offensive line talent. And then the 2020 NFL schedule was also released this week, so we get to see when and where potentially our teams play this upcoming season. Obviously, we don't know with the pandemic if the games will play out the way that the schedule has them playing out, but I really hope that they do. I really hope that in the NFL is the one sport that's not affected by the COVID-19 pandemic. But speaking of the schedule, let's just jump right into the next segment. We're going to talk a lot more about the schedule and my favorite matchups. I'm going to give you guys my 5 favorite primetime games for the upcoming NFL season. So the 2020 NFL schedule has officially been released. This has always been, since I was a small kid, one of my favorite days of the year is you get to finally see where your favorite team is going to play, when they're going to play, who they're going to play. We're going to go over a couple different points that I would like to get across about the NFL schedule. And then we're also going to jump into, I'm going to give you guys my 5 favorite primetime games coming up this year. There's a lot of really, really good primetime games. Some sweet night games that we're going to see this season. The 2020 NFL season this year will kick off on Thursday night like it usually does at 8:20 p.m. on NBC. It will be the defending Super Bowl champions, Kansas City Chiefs. We're going back to the Super Bowl champs playing the very first game of the season. Last year we kind of went away from that because I think everybody was bored of the Patriots constantly playing the first game of the season. But we have the Kansas City Chiefs hosting the Houston Texans in a divisional round rematch. This will be a really fun game to start off the season. Week 1 has some really, really exciting game stuff that I'm excited to see, and I'm sure everybody else is excited. We also have we usually have the doubleheader on Monday night in the first week of the season. That's going to feature in the first game. We're going to have the Steelers at MetLife Stadium against the New York Giants, and then we have the Tennessee Titans against the Denver Broncos. Those are 2 kind of under the radar teams that I think could be pretty fun this year. And Tom Brady's career there in week 1 is going to start in New Orleans against Drew Brees. I think that's going to be one of the most viewed opening day games we're going to see in a long time. There's going to be a lot of viewers for that. I know I'm going to be tuned in. It's a 4:25 o'clock game, so it'll be the second wave of games there in week 1. That's going to be a fun game. And a lot of the games in week 1 are actually divisional games. There was a lot of rumors just before the schedule came out that the NFL would not schedule divisional games before or like the first few weeks of the NFL season because of the COVID-19, so that they could play the divisional games, the really important games later on in the season in case those games get canceled. But that was basically thrown completely out the window because 9 of the 16 matchups in week 1 are divisional games. We do see that a lot on the NFL schedule, so there'll be a lot of really important matchups right off the gate, right away. And there's some key rookie debuts in week 1. Week 1 has Joe Burrow playing against the LA Chargers at 4 o'clock on CBS. So we get to see Joe Burrow's career start for the Cincinnati Bengals. Chase Young will be facing off against Philadelphia and Carson Wentz. 1 o'clock, and Jeffrey Okudah, the 3rd pick in the draft, is going to be facing off against Chicago. Those are just the top 3 picks, potential rookies that could be entertaining to see in week 1. And then we keep going. We look at the rest of the schedule. I just kind of jotted down some games that stood out to me, some games that I thought could be entertaining. The Chiefs and the Ravens play in week 3. That seems like a really, really important pivotal game for the AFC playoff picture right in week 3, right in the 3rd week of the season. Should be a really entertaining matchup. We also have the Bengals and the Dolphins in week 13 playing. The reason that I put this one down is I think by week 13, I would not be surprised if Tua is playing for the Dolphins. So we could see Tua versus Burrow, the top 2 quarterbacks in this year's draft, going head-to-head in week 13. That could be an entertaining matchup. And there's actually a Christmas Day game this year on the NFL schedule. And that's the Vikings versus the Saints at 4:30 on Fox and NFL Network. So that'll be entertaining. I mean, every single time the Vikings and Saints play, it seems to be just an absolutely crazy matchup. So that'll definitely be an exciting game to have on Christmas Day and to compete with the NBA games that are always on Christmas Day. So, and then the Thanksgiving games, these are more marquee games that people really care about. We obviously have the Lions and Cowboys. They're always on Thanksgiving. The first game is the Texans at the Lions, so you got a really entertaining team to go in there. Deshaun Watson's going to go in there, maybe a little bit of a more entertaining team than the Lions to maybe bring those viewerships up. And then the second game, you have the Redskins at the Cowboys, 4:30 on Fox. This is a fine matchup. I mean, you see this matchup, it feels like every other year is the Redskins versus Cowboys. I'm personally kind of sick of the NFC East. Something about them, I'm not too entertained by the NFC East, but I'm hoping that that'll be an entertaining game. And then the final game is the Ravens at Steelers, so we get to see that exciting rivalry have another chapter. I'm really hoping that the Steelers are going to be back this year and that they can be a playoff caliber team with Big Ben. So this could be an entertaining matchup. And then we have another note, stadium openings. These are going to be the first games played in the new stadiums. We have the Las Vegas Raiders in week 2 are going to be opening Allegiant Stadium, I believe it's called in Las Vegas. Allegiant Stadium against the Saints. It's going to be on Monday Night Football, so that'll be definitely entertaining. There's a decent Monday Night Football game for whoever is going to be in the booth there on Monday Night Football. And the Rams and Chargers Stadium, SoFi Stadium, will be open right in week 1 against the Dallas Cowboys. The Chargers will play their first game in week 2 against the Kansas City Chiefs. And to me, it looks like a lot of those teams have a really good chance of losing their first game in their new NFL stadium. But instead of just continuing to go through the entire NFL schedule sporadically, throwing things all over the place, I've decided to put together my top five favorite primetime games this year. A lot of really entertaining primetime games. I've noticed that Thursday Night Football this year has a lot of really entertaining games, and that's kind of different because usually Thursday night is the game that has all the throwaway primetime games. So it's definitely a fresh thing to have Thursday night have a ton of really, really fun games. I think three or four of the games I have in my top 5 are played on Thursday night. The only other one is played on Sunday Night Football. So no Monday night games. That's a little bit disappointing for Monday Night Football again this year. But I tried to give myself some rules for this top 5. I tried not to do the same team twice because I could fill almost this whole list with Kansas City Chiefs game this year. A lot of entertaining primetime games this year. There are a lot of teams that have 5 primetime games. The Patriots, the Cowboys, the Chiefs, the Packers, the 49ers, the Rams, and the Buccaneers all have 5 primetime games. Most of those make sense. I'm not sure why the Patriots got 5 primetime games. To me, I don't see the entertainment factor with the Patriots this year, but I guess the NFL forgot that Tom Brady's not there anymore. But we kind of figured Tampa Bay would have a bunch of primetime games. They're going to be a really fun team to watch this the upcoming year. Other than that, the other teams that I mentioned are playoff caliber championship contender teams. So I'm not really sure why the Patriots got 5 primetime games. That might be something where the NFL kind of regrets that and maybe flexes out of that later on in the NFL season. But without further ado, my top 5 favorite primetime games. And coming in at number 5, it is a Week 11 matchup, the Arizona Cardinals at the Seattle Seahawks. In Week 11 on Thursday Night Football at 8:20 p.m. Eastern Time on Fox and NFL Network. So it's a Thursday night game. It's the Arizona Cardinals, a young up-and-coming team, against the Seattle Seahawks, a team that is consistently good every year. And this might be sort of a game out of nowhere. I don't think a lot of people had this as one of their favorite primetime games this year. But to me, I'm really expecting a lot out of the Arizona Cardinals this year. I have a lot of emotional stock invested in the Arizona Cardinals. So to see Russell Wilson go against Kyler Murray on Thursday Night Football on primetime, I think it'll be a really fun divisional matchup. There could be playoff implications in Week 11. So to me, I just like the Russell Wilson versus Kyler Murray factor. Obviously, they're going to be playing a couple times this year because they're in the same division, but this is the one that happens to fall on a primetime schedule. So I'm definitely excited to see that at number 5. And coming in at number 4, we have another one that's kind of out there, kind of off the radar, but it's a game that really just caught my eye, and it's a game that I'm really excited to watch, and that's a Week 2, another Thursday Night Football game, and that's the Cincinnati Bengals playing in Cleveland against the Cleveland Browns. To me, this matchup just looks like a lot of fun. We have two teams that I'm really intrigued with going into this season. The Cincinnati Bengals, who I think improved more than almost anybody this offseason. They have Joe Burrow, who it's going to be really interesting to see how he plays in his rookie season. We have him in that very improved Bengals team going into Cleveland and playing a team in the Browns, who I think have a lot of really high expectations this year. This is another team that I have high expectations on. I definitely hope, and I think we will see the Cleveland Browns improve this year. So this is a game that is another divisional game. I think Burrow versus Baker is an entertaining storyline, and just two teams with a lot of really fun personalities. Joe Burrow is a really entertaining guy. Baker Mayfield is usually a pretty controversial guy, and Jarvis Landry and Odell Beckham and all the entertainment that brings. So I think the AFC North in general has a lot of entertaining teams. Could see a lot of really cool matchups. This is just one that for some reason, it caught my eye. I think the Bengals versus Browns in Week 2 could be a nice treat early on in the season. And then the number 3 primetime matchup of 2020. I had to sneak in a Tampa Bay, Tampa Brady Buccaneers game with Tom and Rob Gronkowski and Mike Evans and Chris Godwin, that entertaining team. We talked about them playing New Orleans in Week 1. Tom Brady starting his career against Drew Brees. Well, the second of that matchup, the one in Tampa Bay, actually falls on Sunday Night Football. And to me, this is probably one of the most anticipated games for me. This comes in Week 9. It's on Sunday Night Football. And to me, there's something about Sunday Night Football on NBC. It's one of my favorite games of the week. Usually, I really like watching Sunday Night Football. Something about it, the atmosphere, it's fun. So I think it's going to be a really fun, another divisional matchup. All three of these so far have been divisional matchups. We're going to see two of the greatest quarterbacks of all time duel it out on prime time. And the Brady versus Brees factor is definitely a key one to this being number 3. And I just had to fit in a Tampa Bay Buccaneers game. There's no way I could do a top 5 primetime games this year without including this Tampa Bay Buccaneers team that I'm really, really excited to see this year. So in Week 9, we have them going against the New Orleans Saints. Make sure you mark your calendar. Make sure you tell your wife that you have plans that day. So that's my number 3. And then coming in at number 2 on my favorite primetime games of the 2020 NFL season, it's the Dallas Cowboys going into Baltimore in Week 13 to play the Baltimore Ravens. This is another Thursday night football game. It's on Fox and NFL Network. And to me, this could be one of those games like we saw a couple years back with the Chiefs and the Rams, where it's just an offensive explosion. I mean, this is two teams that have really, really exciting offenses. Obviously projected to go in the season. Hopefully their offenses are as good as projected going into the season. But to me, I see a lot of potential in this matchup. Dallas Cowboys and Baltimore Ravens both have very, very different offensive, but very, very equally explosive offenses. The Cowboys tend to do a lot of their work in the air. And obviously they have Ezekiel Elliott, tremendous running back, whereas the Baltimore Ravens do a lot of their work on the ground in a really entertaining, fun running game, which you don't see a lot in the NFL anymore. So the Baltimore Ravens versus the Dallas Cowboys, I think, could be a really, really entertaining season. And it's late in the season. It's Week 13, so there could be a lot of playoff implications. Obviously, these two teams are in different conferences, but I could see both of these teams fighting for the number 1, number 2 seed. Obviously, the number 1 seed is so important this year with the new playoff format where only the number 1 seed gets the Week 1 bye. So I think there could be big playoff implications in this matchup. But without further ado, why don't we move straight on to my favorite primetime matchup of the NFL season. And the number 1 primetime game, in my opinion, in Average Joe's opinion, is the very first game of the season. I had to put this one at number 1. It's the Houston Texans and the Kansas City Chiefs. I mean, assuming that everything goes on without a hitch and there's no problems with the NFL schedule because of the pandemic, I just think Week 1 is gonna hit different. I mean, it's gonna be so exciting to have sports back again. Hoping and praying that sports are back by this point, but just to have football back in general, and then to have a really, really entertaining matchup like the Kansas City Chiefs hosting the Houston Texans, two really, really fun teams. I think this game is just gonna be exciting. It's gonna get the blood flowing. It's gonna be a really fun matchup, and it's a rematch of the divisional round matchup last year, where I believe the Chiefs had what was their lead again? They were up. I have it marked down here in my notes. They had I believe a 21-0 lead on the Kansas City Chiefs in the divisional round. The Kansas City Chiefs came back, so the Texans are going to be motivated to go in there and steal one from the Super Bowl champs in the opening day game. But it doesn't get any easier for the Houston Texans after that. I mean, the first few games for the Houston Texans are brutal. I have the schedule here for the Houston Texans. So the first 7 games of the Houston Texans season are against the Kansas City Chiefs, the Baltimore Ravens, the Pittsburgh Steelers, the Minnesota Vikings, the Jacksonville Jaguars, the Tennessee Titans, and the Green Bay Packers. That is just an absolutely brutal schedule to start the season. So if the Houston Texans, I think there's a lot of pressure here week 1 to get off to a hot start, because if they don't, it could be really, really brutal for the Houston Texans. So yeah, that's my list, my top 5 primetime matchups for the 2020 NFL season. I really hope you guys enjoy the show. Just a reminder, if you're listening to the show on Apple Podcasts, be sure to leave us a review, leave us a rating, so we can get the podcast out to more people, get it circulating around, hopefully get more people interested in the podcast. Don't forget to follow the show on Twitter and Instagram at _Average Joe Show. Thank you guys so much for listening, and we will catch you guys on the next one.